Of course, the Deep South Cranes Blizzard Series returns at Five Flags Speedway this Friday night. But let's take a break and we'll talk a little NASCAR. Of course, big news today, and to help talk about that, our next guest has been covering NASCAR for the past 11 seasons for outlets like NASCAR Scene, SB Nation, and for the past 4 years, USA Today. This year, he stepped out to try something new, and you can find all of his NASCAR coverage on jeffgluck.com. Jeff, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks. It's funny. We've planned this for a long time, and I didn't exactly know this was going to be the day that Dale Jr. retires of all days, so it worked out pretty well to come on today.
I had all these questions lined up for you, and then Dale Earnhardt Jr. ruined it for me. So I guess we'll start with that. Is this really a surprise of him announcing his retirement?
I think the timing is in some aspects. You could say that sure he would have been done in the next year, maybe 2 years, 3 years, but to do it now. I think it's a little bit of a surprise. He said at the start of the season, hey, I'm going to take a couple months and decide, my contract is up, and I don't know whether I want to race beyond that yet. I'll see how my health is. But I think it became obvious to him fairly quickly that, he's lucky to be doing this season at all. He called it a gift and a blessing because he was almost at a point last fall where he was never going to be able to race again with this concussion and the symptoms that were coming from that. And he's now cherishing this opportunity, and I think he just wants to be able to go out on his own terms.
You spent some time with him prior to that concussion. I mean, was there any sign that he was thinking about retirement just yet?
I think it's been on his mind for the last probably couple of years because he started to think of life after racing a bit more as he's gotten into his 40s, what it might look like and what he might want to do next. But I think that the whole concussion thing really accelerated it. I think if he hadn't had that concussion and the health wasn't a concern, we'd probably be talking about Dale Jr. racing into his mid-40s at least, and continuing to be a factor for a while. But I think, he just got married, he wants to have a family. You don't want to be sort of a vegetable or something like that with repeated head injuries. You see what happens to guys in the NFL with CTE and things like that. You don't want to be in that situation when you have your whole life still ahead of you. He's only in his early 40s. So,
are those days gone? Are those days gone of seeing Mark Martin race till he's 50-something years old, Morgan Shepherd, who's still trying to go at it in some races? Are those days gone? Are we seeing the retirement age now mid-40s?
I think so, and I think it's not necessarily because of health or fitness or anything like that, but I think just because these guys have made so much money. They get to their mid-40s and they have families, and they're like, wow, I have maybe tens of millions of dollars in the bank, and I can't do anything with it. I'm on the road every week in my bus, and I can't take vacations. I can't, enjoy my mansion, whatever. I can't, spend time with my kids. My kids are in school, whatever. And I think that accelerates it, If you get to 44, 45 years old and you're like, I've been doing this since I was 18 or 20, why, I think the motivation sort of wanes after a while.
Speaking with Jeff Gluck of jeffgluck.com, covers NASCAR on a weekly basis. You said earlier today on your website, quote, no, NASCAR isn't going to die just because Earnhardt is leaving, nor will it be on life support, but NASCAR is sick and it's serious, end quote. It's no secret NASCAR is struggling, and they're struggling pretty bad. This had to have been terrible news for them today.
I think so. I think it's pretty bad because what's going to happen now is, and they experience this with Gordon fans, you had a lot of fans who sort of been holding on to the sport for a long time because they have their favorite driver still in it. And they haven't agreed with all these NASCAR decisions and changes and constant things that have made the sport very, very different from what they were used to. But they stuck with it. And then once their driver retires, they look at it and they're like, you know what? My reason for watching is gone now, and this is a good time for me to part ways. I hope that's not the case with many Dale Jr. fans, but I suspect that some will take that opportunity to say, you know what, I think I'm good. And next year is going to be absolutely pivotal, for NASCAR to come up with saying, okay, look, this is now what we have, and we've got to build from here. Let's make this the base, let's make this the bottom of the decline, and start building back up. If it keeps going downward, I mean, they're really going to have problems because it's already been going downward.
This year has been interesting because overall I think the racing's been pretty exciting, and the crowds have been decent other than Bristol, and of course weather played a factor. But the TV ratings are still flat. I think Texas had a 20-year low or something to that nature, 2.4 or something to that. But there is a slight uptick in 18 to 35. But other than that, I mean, what's going on? Why is NASCAR losing despite putting on a pretty good product that we've seen with stage racing? What's going on? Why are they losing these hardcore fans?
Well, I think there's a few reasons. You have lost Gordon and you've lost Stewart, so those fans, like we just talked about, may not be watching. You've also lost some fans who don't like more changes, which are the stage breaks. I love the stages this year, but I've heard from a lot of people who are furious about them still, and are like, I'm not watching anymore because of this. I'm thinking to myself, really, because there's a couple extra cautions you're not watching?
Yeah.
But people are really upset about it. It's just, to them, it's another change. It's another breaking up the race, from what they were used to, and it doesn't resemble what it was. And I also think that people are learning that, hey, with the way the playoffs are now, it really doesn't start to matter. Once a driver gets a win, it doesn't start to matter until late in the season. It's very much devalued the regular season in a lot of ways, even with these playoff points. And so they're like, I could go to the mall. I could go to the park today. It's Sunday. It's a nice day. Do I really need to sit in front of the TV for 3.5 hours and watch this? I could follow it on Twitter. I could follow it on live streaming. And I think that that's hurt as well. So with the amount of options there are to do out there today, and the attention span's getting shorter and shorter for all of us, I think that's a threat to NASCAR as well.
I'm with you. I love the stage racing. I think it's really added a lot. It's add really interesting strategies. We saw it last week with Blaney and things of that nature. So I'm with the stage racing, but I agree with you. For some reason, these fans they just can't catch on to it. But I'm biased when I kind of ask this question, and so I'll leave it to you. Do you think one of NASCAR's biggest competitor is short track racing?
Well, I think the problem is, you look at short track racing, and you're getting a lot of action and excitement that, quite frankly, in a lot of NASCAR races these days, you're not seeing on TV. I always say to myself, if NASCAR, let's say all the mile-and-a-half tracks in NASCAR were short tracks, and then you only had 6 races a year that were mile-and-a-half tracks or something, I think the sport would be in a completely different situation because short tracks are where it's at.
Yep.
I mean, that's the most competitive, exciting racing. A lot of times the leader can't get away as much, and when the leader does get away, he's still having to deal with lap traffic very quickly.
Yep.
And, that creates a lot of action. On these bigger tracks, you just don't have that in a lot of cases. And NASCAR overbuilt when that whole trend was to build these cookie-cutter tracks. I just, in a fantasy world, always wonder what would happen if the cookie-cutters were actually short tracks.
Speaking with Jeff Gluck of jeffgluck.com. Jeff, who does Rick Hendrick turn to replace the 88? And I even said they may even discuss not even keeping the 88 team, but who does he turn to fill that spot?
I think it's the question is what do you want from the sponsors? So, you go to the existing sponsors right now, Hendrick Motorsports. They're still very, very high dollar sponsors. They haven't gotten on with the trend of cutting rates. I mean, they're still paying the rates that were from 10 years ago, 20, 25 million a year, depending on how many races. And so you can't, in some ways, say to these sponsors, okay, yeah, you've been sponsoring Dale Jr. now and paying this top dollar. Hey, Alex Bowman, he's cool, right? and you're not going to get the same money for that.
Yeah.
You could have those sponsors, but they would be certainly at a reduced rate. So the question is, do you go out and get a driver possibly with a buyout? I mean, you pay him to get out of his contract, or do you lure Carl Edwards or somebody like that back out so you can get a huge name and keep that top dollar?
Yeah.
Or do you go with one of the younger guys and have to deal with the reduced rate for your team? I think that's what Hendrick is going to have to decide. I don't really know what the right answer is.
Well, we'll all learn over the next, because there's a lot, there's a question with Casey Kane, whether he'll return at the end of his contract. So I don't envy Rick Hendrick right now, but I'm sure they'll figure something out. Okay, so let's move to you really quickly. You took a big step. You left USA Today, riding NASCAR for them, and took a big step in starting your own website, jeffgluck.com. And you have a very unique setup where people come and they become patrons of your website, where they can give basically like a tip jar or whatnot. Explain jeffgluck.com and how that works.
Yeah, I started my own thing, and I first wrestled with maybe I should make it a subscription site. You pay $2 a month or something like that, and you can access the content. And I thought that's just not. I just don't think that's a great model, especially in the NASCAR world where so many fans are very blue collar. They're watching the budget. They're not going to necessarily want to pay, and not everybody's going to be able to afford to pay something. So the model I have is, if you like what I do essentially, or you like my race coverage, you are welcome to help me out and keep me afloat essentially by contributing to the site. If not, it's still available for people to read. Either way, I just don't want to force people to have to pay. So it's sort of a pay what you want. I mean, if I don't get the money, I'm not going to be able to continue as a career. So far, it's working, and I'm extremely thankful that it is, because I love being at the track and covering it. So I'll just see how long it goes on. But yeah, it's been really interesting. It's essentially the same model as patrons were of artists back in the day, in like the Renaissance or something, where somebody's creating art or paintings, and somebody is funding them basically, and that's what's happening with my site. So it's been a lot of fun so far.
So for you fans listening, if you don't know who Jeff Gluck is, if you saw the Kyle Busch Joey Logano fight, that was Jeff Gluck's video. How were you the only one to land that punch on video? How many views did you get off that?
I think it's a little bit close. I think it's close to 2 million right now. Some of it's on YouTube. Yeah, so I
that's how I've explained it to people. Who's like, who's Jeff Gluck? If you saw that video, that's him.
Yeah, I feel bad that Fox was in that position, because I'm sure that their cameraman got chewed out after that or whatever. Yeah, it just turned out I was the only one to be right in the right place at the right time. I was walking down pit road, and I just happened to see Kyle Busch walking down too, and he had wrecked on the other end of pit road. And I'm thinking, why is he walking this way? He needs to go to the care center. He wrecked. Why? I don't understand. So I just pulled out my phone, because, when you see Kyle Busch walking angrily down pit road, you want to see where he's going. I didn't know who he's mad at or anything, because I was outside on pit road at the end of the race and hadn't seen a replay. But I just kept following him until he walked right up to Joey Logano and punched him in the face.
Well, that's all. I mean, it was awesome, and of course, that was a talk for quite some time. And of course, Kyle Busch has been to Five Flag Speedway, and we've seen similar exchanges there. One of my favorite things, though, on your website, jeffgluck.com, is your 12 questions that you do. And one of my favorite is the one you did with Ryan Newman a few weeks ago after his win at Phoenix. What is your all-time favorite 12 questions interview?
Oh, that's a great question. There's one with Dale Jr. A couple of years ago. Actually, most of them with Dale Jr. are pretty good. He's, in general, probably one of the best quotes in sports. And I feel like he's nice enough that, he's done the 12 questions enough. He knows where I'm going with it. And he, gives extra effort, like he's trying to give funny and good answers. And it's just, it's gold what comes out of his mouth. I'm really going to miss covering him. it seems effortless for him to just come up with witty things and creative analogies and things like that. And he's just so genuine, and it just comes across really well in an interview form. And that's in general, the guy that you really want to talk to, because it's just fun.
Yeah, ESPN showed his This Is Sports Center commercial, and it was hilarious. I mean, and you could tell it's just that dry sense of humor that you talked about that he has. I mean, there's no reaction. His tone of voice doesn't change, but it's just hilarious. Okay, so really quickly before we let you go, Jeff, what's your favorite all-time short track that you've been to?
I have a real passion for Martinsville. I don't know. There's just something about Martinsville where you can. It feels like more of a local track. There's a way to get up in the turns, and you can stand inside the turns in the infield and just feel like you're right there. And it reminds me of when I covered like Orange Toe Speedway in California. It's just it feels smaller than I think maybe it really is, because it's still a half-mile track and everything. But I love the feeling of being able to go to a track and feel like you could just reach out and touch the cars, like they're right there. And that if you had a tennis ball in your hand, you could throw it and it would peg the car. That's like my test for how close you are. They're like, hey, I could throw a ball right now and hit the car.
Yep.
I just love that feeling, and it just feels like you're right on top of them at Martinsville. And I love the combination of it's still a big-time race, but they're right there at the same time.
What is the one short track that's on your bucket list?
Five Flags Speedway.
Hey, I was hoping you would think about that question. So, man, that's awesome, man. Well, thanks for your time.
No, seriously, though, I really do want to come to the Snowball Derby someday, especially. That would be super cool. It's definitely a bucket list race for me. So, yeah, I'm not just saying that.
It's the 50th running of the Derby this year, so we hope you join us. And if you do, come up to the booth. We'll be glad to put you on the PA because we talk for 5 days straight. So we got plenty of time to talk. So we'd love to have you, man. You can find Jeff's coverage of NASCAR on his website, jeffgluck.com. Jeff, thanks for joining us, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And next time we book this, we better be on the lookout for NASCAR news, because apparently it triggers some big stuff.
It was the fight the last time, and then now Dale Jr.'s retirement. So if NASCAR needs us to get them in the news, we'll schedule you.
That's right, exactly.
Jeff Gluck of jeffgluck.com. Thanks, man.
Yep, you got it.